can hear me. Otherwise, they're going to be watching silent slides, that's fine. I don't care. So I'm Antonio. I want to consume APIs. I actually do consume a lot of APIs just in my personal projects. Twitter, Untapped, Facebook, what else? Marvel. I consume Marvel API because I like comic books. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on things because I don't like spending a lot of time on things. That's not fun. I want to get my project going. I want to get the data I need and get developing, not stay discovering. That's kind of frustrating. Now, because APIs are the thing and everybody wants one, I want to provide an API. This may be to myself or to the general public, so all of you guys. So I don't want you all to hate me when you try to consume my API. I also like turtles. They're nice. So if anybody doesn't know what an API is, API stands for Application Programmer Interface. You can find that on Wikipedia or anywhere. API is allow developers to work with data in a simple way and predictable way and consistent way, hopefully. Because if that's not the case, it's not very fun. These days, the coolest thing out there is RESTful. RESTful is the coolest because it's kind of like a standard. And while that's good, it's more of a philosophy, representational state transfer. It's not good that it's not a standard because that means less consistency. It's good that it's more of a philosophy because that means flexibility. But between those two, there's lots of opportunity to mess things up and provide something that isn't going to be fun for your consumers or yourself, like I said, if it's a microservice. They still are the coolest. I don't know if anybody here has used like a SOAP interface before. If you have and you're laughing, be prepared to share your horror story at the end so everybody can hear about how great SOAP wasn't. Okay, so there's already lots of APIs out there, tons of them. Like I said, everybody wants one, so lots of people have them. Do we need more? We're already consume data from lots of services. Why do we need more about everything? Do we really need the API of things? We have the Internet of Things. Do I need an API for my blanket? Do I? Maybe. Kind of, actually, considering now that the Internet of Things, it probably has something it's going to tell me. Mostly people want them because companies especially will want to push their own data further and leverage developers. I don't want to make every single kind of application each one of you wants. You guys can make it based on my data and be dependent to me and give it out to all your friends so I don't have to develop it. It just wouldn't be possible for me to develop everything for everybody, but if I can offer the data set in a way that'll encourage you to make things, to be makers, then that's more stuff of people consuming my data. Good for me as a company. Yay, everybody's beholden to me. So additionally, beyond companies and stuff, there's the personal API is kind of a thing now. And it sounds like a weird concept, I think, especially when I say it. Most people think this is what I mean when I say the personal API. You get a cat, it's taking a selfie. At least it returns JSON, so that's nice. It's not XML. So I like this cat. It's already pretty cool. Standard response code, 200, not something goofy. I was consuming Zillow's API, and for a successful response, they returned 0. 0. I don't know why. They decided 0 was cool. Maybe my only guess is they mean 0 errors happened on this call. It's the only logic I can put behind it. But it doesn't really help me. And actually, as soon as I hit that, I was like, yeah, I'll try this again later when I'm really feel like doing more discovery on this. So this is not what I mean when I say the personal API. Oop, too far. I mean this. So I'm on GitHub. I'm on Twitter. I use a service called Untapped to check in beers I drink because I drink a lot of beer. These are endpoints about me. I've grouped them all together like this, and if I documented it out, I could say this is my API. This is my personal API. If you wanted to get data on me, where am I? What am I drinking? What am I working on? All this stuff about me. This is functionally a clunky personal API. So we're already part of it, whether we like it or not. There's so many services that we all use that pass our data out. So whether there's an API about you, you're not hiding from anybody. So, in fact, here's an example of a live personal API. This guy has some sort of sleep tracking thing he's using, weight tracking, and it goes down further to like his Fitbit, all this stuff. So if I want to know when this guy takes a nap, I can programmatically now. I can know if he gains weight and hassle him on Twitter. I can monitor those. I don't have to call him. He's got an API. I can build on this and have my own phone application. Be like, oh, he gained 10 pounds. I'm going to tweet at him right now. When he gains weight, yeah. Yeah, I could just do that. If gained 20 pounds, auto tweet, put down the donuts, dude. But he clearly wants us to consume his API. He's got some standard stuff here. He's got his endpoints. He's got sample returns, descriptions here, my weight in kilograms. So I know what units I'm working with here. I've got information that I can build on. And that's because he probably likes APIs and, you know, doesn't have a whole lot to do. So now he's transitioned. He's still both, but he's transitioned from consumer to API provider. So as a consumer, he provides his authentication if needed. You may have data that's fine for everybody in the world to see no matter what. You're not afraid of DDoS. So you don't need auth. That's fine. He wants a format that he loves. He's providing JSON because everybody loves JSON. So not XML. He's also providing documentation. Using documentation he's already consumed from the API endpoints he's created from his services. He's also providing documentation. So he's doing all these things on both sides. I don't know about his consistency because I haven't checked. He may lie about his weight, put in some sort of filter, lies about it. Don't know about his versioning, but versioning is awesome and is needed in every single API that's provided out there. And I don't have a way for being warned of his changes, but he doesn't love me. So if you love your consumers, the consumers of your API, you need to warn them of your changes because it will break everyone's stuff. So he's most of the way there as an API provider. And really, he's just aggregating his own stuff into a personal API. But already, because he's probably used to all this RESTful stuff, he's most of the way there as a good provider. And being a good provider means you respect the API contract. So this is an unspoken commitment to consistency and usability of the resources you provide with respect to the developers who are building on your API. It's unspoken because I don't think it needs to be said, you know, the golden rule, right? Do unto others. You want people to provide documentation for you. You want people to provide sample data, sample calls, all that stuff. So you should think, I need to provide that to my consumers. This contract includes, but totally not limited to, security. Is this HTTPS? What kind of auth am I using? I mean, API keys, OAuth. Definition. How do I define my routes? Are they descriptive of the data I'm getting back? Is it just like route 1 is objects? That doesn't mean anything. So if it's like pets, that tells me there's animals probably in here. Hopefully, just animals. Response codes. Like I said earlier about Zillow, using 0 as a response code. Why are you not using the same response codes the rest of the internet uses? That just feel like being special, I guess. I don't know, sure. Output changes. So breaking output changes need to be told to everybody because it will break your stuff and you may not know how to handle whatever change in the JSON format or change of keys, any of that stuff. This is all things we need to respect because people are building upon your API. People are using this as the foundation of their applications. And without respect to the API contract, you're likely to break other people's stuff. And that's just not fun. You don't want to be that guy or girl. Also, API uptime. That's really important. So maybe your API is on your awesome GoDaddy hosting. Neat. Pretty sure it's not going to be up when I need it. And you know, even if that's not true, even if you've taken a lot of precautions, you still need to be cautious about that. Uptimes, especially with APIs. It's like I got that example of that later. Sorry. Also, the valid formatting returns. If you're returning JSON, it better be valid JSON, because otherwise it's not going to fly anywhere. If you're returning XML, well, you got a little more leeway there, but it should at least still be consistent. So when I say definition, I mean definition of your API as your routes and your documentation, not just descriptions. So with that comes versioning, because the definition of your API can change. So if it changes, that's another version. Semantic versioning is the norm. We've got major, minor, and patch are the increments here. Major is a version where you're going to break somebody's stuff. You need to be warned. This is version 2 of my API. Don't use it if your application needs everything that's on version 1. And here's the differences. Minors are really important because they allow you to extend your API in a backwards compatible manner. If you're adding stuff to any sort of data stream and you're not considering everybody who's already built on it, you're probably going to break somebody's stuff and they're not going to like it. You wouldn't want somebody to do that to you. You wouldn't want to wake up tomorrow and your car keys are different. They don't work anymore. That's like versioning. Patches, bug fixes. Still backwards compatible. If the bug requires some sort of like super giant change to where everything's all different because this bug was the cause of everything that's wrong with your API, then push that up to a major version. But most of the time, when you're creating an application, you can probably ignore the patch and minor unless your API really specifically wants you to get down to all 3 of those double dot. Otherwise, you can say, I just want the major version. Everything should be backwards compatible, and it should be non-breaking. I just need V1 or V2 or V3, whatever it is. So you can also add other labels for pre-release and for the upcoming versions of your API. This is really good to let people know in advance. I need to know what adjustments I need to make, and are they going to be difficult? These are all the things that need to happen before code happens. That's why I haven't got to code yet, because the coding part's actually pretty easy. APIs are usually designed and adjusted, not necessarily coded, because the code parts, you're just serving up data. With that comes documentation. The more is better. I don't think I've ever seen anything where I'm like, wow, this is too much documentation. I don't need to know all this stuff. Please trim this down. Can I get a pamphlet or something? Also, really good is a test console. When I go to an API and I'm able to make an API call right then and there and see the response, I feel like I can work with it. When it's this mystery that I gotta devote some development time to get a working API call with whatever crazy things you have in your headers or crazy endpoints that change, it's a little bit of a barrier. The nice thing with APIs, because the code part isn't so complex, really, there's ways to auto-gen your code. So my favorite is Swagger. What they'll allow you to do is put lines in your code that they will then come through and read and create your API documents for you. So as you're creating your routes, you can put in the description. You can put in things like what headers it's going to require, what possible status codes it's going to return. In some cases, it's impossible to return, say, like an empty 204. So why include it? But as you're developing and as you're coding up your API, Swagger will then pick up where all these coding things that you put in there and just generate a doc with a live tester. So it's pretty nice. There's quite a few different services out there like that. Whichever one is best for you is the one to use, but I definitely recommend checking out Swagger. So your consumers need you to live this. You need to be a part of it all the time. Anytime you're working with your API or starting a new version or adding to it new endpoints or any of that stuff, all this contract needs to be respected. Like I said, it's unspoken, but they expect it. And you should expect it especially if it's a microservice and you're going to consume it later. You don't want to be that guy to yourself. So we can all play nice if we just keep all these things in mind. So sometimes I meet an API barrier, and I don't like it. It's troubling. Like I said, the Zillow one, I haven't visited that again, honestly, because of that. Just because of that one response code, I haven't picked that back up. And every barrier that happens is another reason to not use your API. A lot of times there's data that can be got in another API or some other way. And if there's barriers between me accessing your data and developing on it, it's going to leave me feeling like Tobey Maguire here. So here's some barriers I came up on. First one's from Marvel. And I love comic books, so I was like, when this came out, I was like, oh, cool, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something, and it's probably going to have Spider-Man. So I go into their docs, and I see this. Status code 409, limit greater than 100. Status code 409, limit invalid or below 1. And on and on and on. So thanks for that, I guess. So if I get a status code 409, I know that it's not 200, and that's pretty much all I know. So that was nice of them. That really didn't like that. Like I said, I consume Untapped. This is if you don't know what it is, it's a beer check-in service. It's a lot like Foursquare or Facebook check-ins, but you say, I'm drinking this beer at this place. So I use that data for a lot of stuff, but I got this email from them a while ago saying they were going from HTTP to HTTPS, which is fine, better security, right? Why did you not start with HTTPS? Like, did you not know about SSL before when you started making your API? You just learn about this Untapped? I don't know. I hope they hear it because I'm live streaming this and send an apology. But these two are kind of barriers, and these, especially this one with Untapped, I'm already using it. So this happened. The application I made, several of my friends use. This tells me when beers I want are checked in around town. So they're actually live using this. I'll just get a tweet, right? Broke for me when I got that. So I had to go to all my endpoints and put on an S. And not that big a deal. I know it's just an S. But it's kind of a big deal because I shouldn't have to do that, really. My application should run based on the documentation you gave me in the first place. Because SSL was a thing when this came out. So these are just two barriers I've experienced. And I got this one the other day. Went to Starbucks, went to pay for my coffee. This is a really good example of how not living the contract, the API contract, can have a big impact on your users, your business. I'm trying to give them money, and I can't. What if I didn't have my wallet? What if I didn't have something else? I just relying on my phone because it always works. But now they're telling me that they're doing maintenance service at 2:47 p.m. I really doubt that Starbucks decided to do some maintenance in the middle of the afternoon on Thursday. I feel like they're not telling me the truth, too. But the bigger problem is, and maybe it's just down and they didn't want to admit it. That's fine. I don't really care. The big problem is they're not living that contract themselves. They're not providing uptime to themselves. This isn't a public API, I don't think. This is an API Starbucks created and consumes, and they let themselves down, and now me. And so that's kind of like the consequences of not living this API contract. And like I said, all of this is before we even look at any sort of codes and stuff. So let's look at that. Micro frameworks. Why not a framework? You can make your own, sure. But using a micro framework will make it more RESTful. You argue all day about what RESTful is and how RESTful something is or isn't. But if you use a micro framework, off the bat, you're going to be pretty RESTful. This is a promotion of standardization, but you're still free to mess it all up. It's fine. You can go in there and change your status codes to 1 million or whatever you want. It's still up to you, but it makes it harder for you to do that because it's a pain to do that, so you're probably not gonna. They're micro. I like that. It's only what you need. This is an API. I don't need anything. I don't need a bunch of fancy stuff. It's probably not going to get that complicated. And if it is, you might have to rebuild. But I guess that's probably a good problem to have because that means people are consuming it and you're realizing how complicated you needed to make this. It's simple. Working with micro frameworks is super simple and quick. Very, very quick. This next part's going to fly by. So which one do you use? You do Google for micro framework and API, and you'll get a bunch of different results. What language do you want to use? It doesn't have to be a particular language. It's an API. Nobody cares what it's written in. When I consume any API, I don't know. I don't even think about what it's written in. I just care about the JSON that's returned. It can be written in BASIC. I don't care. So a lot of people will be calling in your API in lots of languages. So back to the docs thing, remember for your docs to not get so caught up in language preferences. Docs should be agnostic to all languages. So you should use just one language. There's no reason to have different parts of an API in different languages, and whichever one's easy for you. So if you like PHP or hate it, like Max said, some people do, that's fine. PHP is fine. Python's fine. The ones I'm going to go through today are a PHP one, Python, and Node, just because I like those things. You have to maintain this API, or someone else might have to maintain this API. So it's probably good to use a language that the people in your group or company speak, and not just do something nobody cares about or hates. So like I said, we're gonna do these three languages. We're only gonna do one get root. And no database or auth. We're going to keep it super simple. Just an endpoint I can hit and get some static JSON. This is going to be my static JSON. Trap, yes. Because Akbar is awesome, and the voice actor passed away recently, so he's been on my mind. So like I said, this is all we're going to return. You don't have to return JSON. You can return XML, YAML, whatever you think your consumers want. But for today's purposes, it's a trap. The frameworks I'm gonna show here, like I said, it's gonna be really quick. Express is a node package. Flask there's built, not necessarily started, but contributed to by the folks who run Twilio, and those guys consume it. So I really like that about them. They're contributing to something and the consumer. So in that regard, it's hard for them not to respect the API contract. So I like that about Flask. Lumen is from Laravel. I don't know if any of you guys have used Laravel. It's the PHP framework. I really like the Laravel's approach, because it's just like they snipped out part of Laravel and here's your micro framework. And then when you're done with that and you decide something got more complex and you need some of the other resources that the larger framework has, you can just shove it right back into where it was. I think that's pretty cool. It's almost like a framework upgrade path or something. And finally, WordPress. Yep, that's a thing. WordPress has, as of 4.4, I believe, is started its core, some RESTful API stuff, but we'll save that one for later. First one is Lumen, like I said. It's pretty fast, especially on PHP 7. And if you're already in Laravel, it's a pretty obvious choice, because it does things pretty much the Laravel way. And like I said, you can shove it right back in. And elephants are cool too. I like elephants. Express is Node. It's super minimal. The nice thing about doing something with Express is if you're already in Node and your front end, any sort of like documentation and stuff, can be in Node or in regular JS, you just have to speak JS the whole time. So it's nice to have one language that I'm speaking from my back end to the front end and not have to worry about being a polyglot or other polyglots. It's all JS. JS, all the things. And Flask, like I said, Twilio use it. It's super micro, built by the consumers. I love that. I love the giving back to something you use. So the first thing we're going to do when starting on our API is install with our dependency managers. We've got Composer, pip, and npm. These all do pretty much the same thing. And if you use any of them, it's say which one you're going to use and tell it what to install. That's pretty much it. Not a whole lot to say there. So the Flask code needed for the first route. This is it. This is like 7 lines or something like that. And we have a route. And we could hit our API, right? And get our trap return. So yeah, and this is actually on like the front page of their API docs. So it really is that simple. So all my time, this is Postman I'm using to test, and it took me 5 minutes. Like the very first time I ever used it. And you can see trap, yes, returned it fine. And we're already returning 200, not 0. Express is a little bit more. You have to declare a few more things, but essentially it's the same. Also super simple, maybe what, 4 or 5 lines more. And there we have our return again. This one took a little bit longer because you have to declare a few more things. I had to go back to the docs, but in the end, 5 to 10 minutes difference isn't much difference at all. Either way, I already have my first route of my API. The first route for Lumen is a little bit different. It gives you a lot more structure than the other two. The other two started off with, hey, here's the code, put it into a file, start up a web service, and you're good. Lumen gives you a lot more structure. It has controllers and folders of other stuff that I didn't even look into yet, and a folder called app, and then a folder called HTTP, and then a file called routes where I have to put my routes. So it took me a little bit longer because I had to say, oh, where do these go? You know, and I hadn't been working a lot on Laravel, so I haven't done much with it. So this did take me a little bit longer, but as you can see, I'm pretty much just doing the same thing. I'm declaring a route every single time, /Akbar, and returning my static JSON every single time. So while it did take me a little bit longer, it's still under 20 minutes, which I think that's probably fine. I don't think that's a very long time. So the nice part about any of these frameworks, while it took us so little time to create routes, we're already a little restful. We're already returning common web status codes. We already have a lot of other controllers that we can then call upon to do cool stuff, like only return certain status codes if that we need, not all of them, or a bunch of crazy ones that we made up. They will keep our routes organized. We'll know where everything is if we need to make changes. Now we can version easily. I mean, if it took me 5 minutes to make my first route and I need to make another version, I can just start over. I'll have 5 minutes that I'll be done. And we're already using common web verbs. We're using get, delete, and put and post are all in there, including some of the other ones that I find in APIs every once in a while, like, what is it, head and option, I think. Yeah, sometimes those are in there. That's cool if you want to use them, but they're common enough and you're not making up something silly. The other good thing is your framework code is already well documented. These guys have done all that work for you. You don't have to build something from scratch and then document everything from scratch. You're using a technology that everybody else can learn how to use just as fast, 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, just as fast as you did. There's also community. Like I said with Twilio, you can contribute back to these. You can help make it better. Other people are doing that too, and you can ask them questions and say, hey, I ran into a barrier of something or a problem I have. Have you faced the same challenge? There's stuff on Stack Overflow, GitHub, all the fun places. So that's nice as opposed to building it from scratch. And the really nice thing is it takes so very little time to get started. Like I said in one of my first slides, I don't want to spend a lot of time on things. I'd rather get to the important stuff. So in the end, I just really want something delicious, consistent, and easy to consume. I want a tall, cool glass of JSON. As a consumer, that's all I want, and that's what I want to provide as an API or as a data provider. Now we can serve up code or serve up data that others can enjoy and be refreshed with our awesome API stuffs. So with this now easy to use, we can spend more time on the documentation, all these details. We can decide on what authentication to use. This is going to play a big role later when you start deciding you have sensitive data, or maybe you don't have sensitive data, but exposing all these endpoints are causing problems for your servers with people just hitting them randomly or scraping them or crawling them for no good reason. You might want to have some auth then. And then which auth? Do you want to do API keys? What's the benefits there? You're just passing these strings and headers, or please don't pass them in the URLs. Don't do that. Or you might want to use whatever you want to use. That's going to affect you later as the consumer, if you're the consumer or any consumer, when the next version comes out. And if you may or may not want to change that. And then how do you even handle versioning? Are you going to make a separate instance every time, or are you going to have some sort of controller there? I mean, these are the things that that you need to decide before the routing. And it's nice that these micro frameworks allow you to have more time. You got 5 minutes of code and spend the rest of the day coming up with these answers. Especially organization of your information in your JSON responses. What do your keys look like? Are they descriptive? Does it say like thing 1, thing 2, thing 3? And then I have to go try and guess what you meant. You can spend more time on documentation. Like I said, there's no such thing as too much documentation. Document it all. All the things can be documented and described over and over again, and it can be everywhere. Create example calls and returns. People love examples. I need to know what I'm dealing with before I even get started. The more I know before I even call your API, the better. That'll make me more informed and like your API more. Now people love you because you did all these things. You have an API that devs can build on, and this will help your API community grow. If you're providing data to the public and it's something useful in any way, shape, or form, probably somebody's going to start talking to somebody else about it, and then that goes on to someday somebody puts up a forum and you don't even know it. But if it's usable and gets popular, then a community will probably happen around it to some degree. I mean, we have all these people here now, this community, just because APIs are popular. Every one of the devs who build on your stuff will love you for this and appreciate the dev love. And like I said, I like turtles. Okay, so now the WordPress API. Excited for the WordPress API? Okay, that's cool. Let's get somebody else. It seems like a tiresome subject because it kind of is, because it's WordPress, and WordPress is always kind of a different thing, you know? So depending on who you ask, WordPress is 26 to 33% of all websites, depending on who you ask. But it's still a ton of websites. I think everybody knows that and agrees to that. So the WordPress plugin code needed for the first route is pretty much, like I said, saying you're declaring your route and declaring your return. But there's a little bit more, and that's why it's kind of a different subject. You can't just start with a framework and declare your route and declare your returns. You have to know how to make a plugin too. So if you don't know how to make a WordPress plugin, now you got to go to the WordPress plugin docs and figure out how to make a WordPress plugin. And now you have you're beholden to all the other things that go with a WordPress plugin, not just your first route. The other thing too is a lot of this is pretty free. You can do pretty much anything you want. Whereas the other ones kind of build in some RESTful philosophy there. This doesn't. In their docs, they'll tell you, you should probably put v1 in your route. You don't have to. And if you don't, there's nothing declaring one version from another. It's little things like that that make this a different subject. It's still small and it's part of a frameworky thing called WordPress, but it's not an API micro framework yet. It's still in its infancy, so it may get better. I hope it gets better. Hope people contribute and make it better. There's already a huge, obviously, WordPress community. But the time to first route was more like an hour, because now I have to learn a bunch of other stuff and make sure it doesn't break all the other plugins that are playing there too. That also makes it a very different animal in that it needs to play nice with other things. So you know how to make the plugin first. The documentation's in its infancy, so it's not really there. The community behind, well, WordPress has a great community. There's not a whole lot for the API, and not really RESTful yet. Even the people I know who just totally live and breathe WordPress, most of them have not even touched it. And that's because it's kind of just not ready. It has the potential to do everything that WordPress has done for websites. And you can interpret that how you like. You may think that's great. You may not think that's so great. But this particular one, because it powers so much of just the internet today, it has the potential for just blow all these standards out of it. So if you're going to do something in the WordPress API, remember that API contract I was talking about. And while it's not in there for you, build it in there. So you're not filling it up with clunky, poorly maintained, poorly documented APIs, like the clunky, poorly maintained, poorly documented websites we have. So like I said, this is way more about philosophy. As you saw, the code's pretty minimal. Really doesn't take much to make an API. You can provide it anytime you want, but if you got 5 minutes, if you have 5 minutes after this, we can just make one. Yeah, it's more about the good dev experience, way less about coding. You design it and deliver the data that's easy for devs to consume, and you configure it after, hopefully, you test it yourself and try to be that consumer, because that's just part of respecting that contract. That's at the heart of what REST is, and because it's a philosophy, there's not a stark definition there, and that's why things are RESTful. And there's plenty of debate of how RESTful something can or cannot be. And delivering a good API will help your platform. You want people to do this. I mean, you're delivering the data for a reason. It'll help your platform if you're delivering it to the public or to yourself in microservices. You'll be able to develop faster because your API was just there. It wasn't a barrier anymore. So I don't know. It depends on what kind of, and then it also depends on what kind of data you're providing to the public or to yourself. And these are all the things that you need to think about before the code part. And that's kind of why I did it in this order. So good luck if you're going to make an API. Send me a link. I'd love to test it, and I'll be happy to tell you what things I don't like about it or love about it. Even if it's a WordPress API, I'll still test it. So let's talk about it.